What if I told you that the Kenya Defense Forces weren't just born out of patriotism, but out of fire, betrayal, and survival itself? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of East Africa's most respected armies, the Kenya Defense Forces. We'll trace how they rose from colonial roots, the struggles that shaped them, the wars that tested them, and the legacy they carry today. Stick around, because the story of the KDF is not just about uniforms and guns. It's about a nation's identity, loyalty, and resilience. As we dive more deeper, ensure you like, subscribe, and share. The birth of Kenya's armed forces. Kenya's military story began under British colonial rule. Back in 1902, the British formed the King's African Rifles, a multi-battalion colonial regiment made up of mostly African soldiers led by white officers. African recruits were often drawn from specific ethnic groups that the British believed to be martial, like the Kamba, Maasai, and Nandi. These men fought in both world wars, not for Kenya's freedom, but to serve the British Empire. Thousands of Kenyan soldiers shed blood in Burma, Ethiopia, Madagascar, and Somalia during World War II. But here's the twist. When they came back home, these soldiers had seen the world. They had fought for causes that weren't theirs, and they started asking, if we can fight for Britain, why can't we fight for Kenya? The independence era and the making of a national army. Fast forward to the 1950s. Kenya is boiling. The Mau Mau uprising against the British colonial rule is in full swing. And here lies the irony. While some Kikuyu men fought as the Mau Mau freedom fighters, others were serving in the King's African Rifle, helping the British suppress the rebellion. When Kenya finally won independence in 1963, Jomo Kenyatta's government had a tough question. How do you transform a colonial army with divided loyalty into a true national defense force? The answer: reshape, retrain, and rename. In 1964, Kenya officially created the Kenya Army. The Royal Air Force unit in Kenya became the Kenya Air Force, and the Navy, which had been a tiny colonial detachment, became the Kenya Navy. And just like that, the seeds of what we now call the KDF were planted. Early challenges: loyalty and stability. Let's be real, it wasn't just smooth sailing. The early years were shaky. In 1964, just a year after independence, a mutiny broke out in the Kenya Army barracks. Inspired by similar revolts in Tanzania and Uganda, soldiers demanded better pay and African officers to replace white commanders. Kenyatta quickly called in the British troops to crush the mutiny, a decision that left scars but also set a precedent. The government would not tolerate rebellion within the ranks. This was the first big test: loyalty. Will the new Kenyan army remain loyal to their state and not become another source of coups and instability? Building a reputation, peacekeeping, and professionalism. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Kenya made a deliberate choice to stay out of messy regional coups and instead focus on building a reputation as a professional, disciplined force. Kenya sent troops on UN peacekeeping missions in Namibia, Sierra Leone, Lebanon, and the former Yugoslavia. Their discipline earned them respect internationally, even as other African militaries were being accused of brutality or corruption. But things weren't perfect. The Kenya Air Force attempted a coup in 1982 against President Daniel Arap Moi. The coup failed, but it led to brutal purges and the restructuring of the armed forces. The Air Force was disbanded and then reconstituted under tighter government control. Still, Kenya's military survived, and that survival mattered. By the late 1980s, while Uganda, Ethiopia, and Somalia were drowning in conflict, Kenya's armed forces remained relatively stable. The rise of the modern KDF. So when did the Kenya Defense Forces, as we know them today, officially come into existence? It wasn't until the 2010 Constitution. The new law reorganized the Kenya Army, Kenya Air Force, and Kenya Navy under one unified structure, the Kenya Defense Forces. The KDF was now not just about defending Kenya's borders, but also about supporting civil authorities, disaster response, and peacekeeping. For the first time, the Constitution clearly outlined the KDF's role, chain of command, and accountability to the people. It was a rebirth, and it couldn't have come at a more critical time. The Somalia challenge and the war against Al-Shabaab. Just across the border, chaos was brewing. Somalia had collapsed into a failed state since the 1990s, and by the 2000s, the terror group Al-Shabaab was launching deadly attacks into Kenya. The tipping point came in 2011 after the repeated kidnappings of foreign tourists and aid workers in Kenya's coastal and northeastern regions. The KDF launched Operation Linda Nchi, Swahili for Protect the Nation. For the first time in history, Kenya sent its military deep into another country, invading southern Somalia to push back Al-Shabaab. KDF captured the strategic port city of Kismayo, cutting off Al-Shabaab's supply routes. In 2012, the KDF formally joined the African Union Mission in Somalia, AMISOM. But the cost was heavy. Kenyan soldiers became targets, suffering deadly attacks, including the El Ade ambush in 2016, where over 140 KDF soldiers were killed. This was the KDF's baptisms by fire on the international stage. It showed their strength, but also their vulnerability. The legacy of sacrifice. Ask any Kenyan today, and they'll tell you the KDF is respected not just because of their discipline, but also their sacrifice. During the Westgate Mall attack in 2013, KDF soldiers stormed the building to rescue hostages from Al-Shabaab gunmen. In 2015, during the Garissa University massacre, the KDF was again at the front line. Even in times of floods, droughts, and pandemics, the KDF has stepped in to deliver aid, build roads, and keep the country moving. The legacy is not just military, it's national service. Problems and controversies. The KDF has faced criticism, allegations of human rights abuses during counter-terrorism operations in the northeastern Kenya, accusations of profiting from Somali trade routes, especially charcoal exports from Kismayo, questions over whether Kenya's deep involvement in Somalia has actually made the country safer or dragged it into a long and winnable war. These challenges raise the big question: how does the KDF balance being protectors of the nation while avoiding the pitfalls of power? What the KDF represents today. The Kenya Defense Forces stand at crossroads. They are not just soldiers with rifles. They are peacekeepers, builders, and symbols of Kenyan unity. Think about it. In a country with over 40 ethnic groups, politics often divides, but the KDF recruits from all communities, creating a rare sense of shared purpose. Their presence in Somalia, their sacrifices during terror attacks, their role in peacekeeping missions, all of this has carved their legacy as one of Africa's most professional and disciplined militaries. But the true measure of their legacy is not just in battles fought, but in the trust they hold among Kenyans. The story of the Kenya Defense Forces is a story of transformation, from colonial battalions used to control a people to a proud national force defending them. From suppressing Mau Mau fighters to chasing down Al-Shabaab, from shaky loyalty at independence to being a symbol of stability in the region. It's a history built on sacrifice, discipline, and resilience. If you thought this story was powerful, wait until you hear the untold story of the Mau Mau fighters. Just click the video on your screen now